Thank you. We will now reconvene the public meeting for Monday, April 7th, 2025. We are rising from closed session with a report and a report regarding the motion that council appoint Mary Preston, Michael Cole, and Mike Ryan to the Sustainability Advisory Committee for 2022 to 2024 term of council. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that report? Moved by Councilor Burns, second by Deputy Mayor Huntley. All in favor? That is approved. Thank you, Council. The next item on the agenda is 7.1, resolution to open the public meeting with regards to 2097 Whittington Drive. So can I get a motion to open the public meeting? Councilor Byrne, moved, seconded by Councilor Edgerton. All in favor? That is approved. So the report, I believe we're hearing from Matt Wilkinson with regards to the report. Matt, we'll hear from you first.
Thank you. Good afternoon through you, Mr. Mayor, and to members of council and public. Today before you is planning report number 2025-16. The report presents two recommendations. One, that council receive and consider all comments related to zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA-01-25. And that two, that bylaw number 2025-19 be approved to rezone the subject lands from the rural employment exception 9 zone to the rural employment exception 10 temporary use 7 zone. The owner of 2097 Whittington Drive wishes to add 4 pickleball courts as a permitted use for a period of 3 years on a portion of the subject property. The land subject to the application are currently zoned rural exception number 9, and a commercial recreation use is not permitted in the M2-9 zone. As such, a zoning bylaw amendment is required. If approved, the applicant is required to then enter into a temporary use agreement with the township. Notice of the amendment was circulated by first-class prepaid mail to all assessed persons within 120 meters or 400 feet of the lands, to all required ministries, agencies, and township directors, department directors. A notice sign was posted on the Whittington Drive frontage of the property, and notice of the public meeting was posted on the township website. The notice complies with the requirements of the Planning Act. Township staff have not received any comments from the public. Comments from the City of Peterborough, Kawartha Pine Ridge District School Board, the County of Peterborough Public Works Department, Canada Post, Enbridge Gas, and Autonomy Conservation. We did receive comments from them, but we did not have any objections. Township Public Works and Township Fire Departments have no concerns with the proposal. Township building staff will require a building permit for the change of use, and the permit application must be supported by floor plans and a report noting that the requirements to justify the proposed occupant loads are going to be required. The capacity of the existing septic system was reviewed and found to be to the satisfaction of township staff. Township Economic Department staff and the Township Parks and Recreation Manager are in support of the application. The proposed amendments are consistent with applicable policies and regulations. Thank you.
Thank you for that report, Matt. Questions from members of council with regards to the report? Deputy Mayor Huntley, and then we'll go to Councilor Byrne.
Through you, Chair to Matt. I'm just out of curiosity, like you're putting up this, whatever you want to call it, the M210 T7, and you're specifically calling it pickleball courts. Like, are we trying to stay that specific, or would we want to open it up and just say courts or racket courts or something like that? Like, we're just always kind of bottling ourselves in here, and I thought we were trying to get away from that. Is there a reason why it's specifically pickleball and not just racket sport?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Deputy Mayor. That's what the application asked for. So rather than opening it up to an interpretation, that's what we put into the bylaw.
Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair, regardless if this pickleball is just a fad or not, I think it's positive. People I've talked to in the community are anxious to see it up and running. There seems to be a pent-up demand at the present, and I don't see any real complication for the site to be used as such.
Thank you for the comments. Seeing any other? If not, we'll now open it up for questions with members of the public in attendance today. Anyone wishing to speak to the application? Going once, going twice, sold. Seeing none, then we'll move forward with regards to the consideration of the report. So the two recommendations are as follows: that council receive and consider all comments related to the zoning bylaw amendment application, and that bylaw number 2025-19 be approved to rezone the subject lands from rural employment exception 9 M29 zone to the rural employment exception 10 temporary use 7 M2-10-7 zone. Moved by Councilor Burns, seconded by Councilor Natchat. All in favor? That is approved. Thank you, council. Moving on to 8.1 on the agenda, Taylor Wilson from Adalaco Consulting. Hopefully I did that right, with regards to the corporate and community energy emissions report. Oh, excuse me. Apologies. Before we get to you, Matt, I need a motion to close the public meeting. Moved by Council Burns, seconded by Deputy Mayor Helmy. All in favor? That is approved. Apologies. The floor is now yours, Taylor, please.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors, public. My name is Taylor Wilson. I'm with Aladico Consulting. We always get Aladaco. We never get Aladico. Do not feel bad at all. I'm here to present a summary of our corporate and community emissions report that we completed for the township. I will be calling it CCER because it is a mouthful. Next slide, please. So agenda for today, brief introductions. I'll talk about our project scope and the outcomes. We'll go through emissions 101. How do we calculate emissions? We'll talk about the results of the community analysis, the results of the corporate analysis, and then we'll have considerations and key takeaways at the end as well. I would like this to be as engaging as possible. Please ask me questions as we go through. If it relates to a slide, that would be excellent. I'd love to talk about it. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, my name is Taylor Wilson. I'm with Aladico Consulting. We were founded in 2007. We're a group of energy professionals providing services to help organizations and municipalities navigate and reach their own energy efficiency and decarbonization goals, whatever those goals may be. So one thing that I think separates Aladico, we want to be very forthcoming. We do not have a environmental agenda. We are not going to tell you to decarbonize. We are assisting organizations with your specific goals, whatever those goals may be. Now, what we see throughout this presentation is some references to a climate change action plan that the township had agreed to in 2016. We'll do some comparisons to where you are in terms of the targets in that. We make no assumptions as to how eager you are to pursue those targets today. Much has changed since then, even recently with changes in carbon tax legislation. So what we hope to do today is provide you with insights so you can make informed decisions about decarbonization or otherwise. Next slide. So what were the scopes and outcomes? So the first was develop this report, the CCER, to provide you with insights around your corporate and community energy and emissions. The second is to benchmark your community results against other municipalities. The third, what we can do with your facilities is we can benchmark them against Canadian standards. And then the fourth is to provide some high-level recommendations to improve in both the community and corporate side. So these are for consideration. The second piece was to develop an energy monitoring and reporting tool. And the purpose of this tool was to essentially enable the township to perform the same analysis that we did. So we developed this in Excel format, and we actually have fields available for you to complete the same analysis we did up until 2040 with very minimal labor. So the study period was 2020 to 2023. So that was the data period that we covered. And the study scope was specifically electricity and natural gas consumption. Next slide, please. So emissions 101, how do you calculate emissions? So as I mentioned, we're talking about natural gas and electricity. On the natural gas side, these are direct emissions. They're generated when natural gas is burned. So it's exhaust, essentially. Electricity emissions, of course, when you consume electricity, there are no emissions at the point of consumption. These emissions are associated with the power generation. So in terms of Ontario, we are mostly hydroelectric and nuclear. It's very low emissions grid. However, we do have natural gas. We do have other renewables as well. So all of these things combined, they result in what is called a grid average emissions factor. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. So when we combine the emissions for natural gas and electricity, we use units of CO2e. This could be in grams, kilograms, tons. And we calculate those using what is called an emissions factor. So you take a unit of natural gas, you multiply it by a factor, you get a unit of emissions. So what we see on the bottom left of this slide is the natural gas emissions factor and the Ontario electricity emissions factor measured in grams of carbon dioxide equivalent per unit of energy. So the obvious observation here is that it is far more carbon intensive to use natural gas than it is electricity. This is fairly specific to Ontario. There are some provinces where the gap is not so large, like Alberta. So when we look to the bottom right, what this is a plot of the Ontario electricity emissions factor that is changing over time. So this is a projection. None of this is for certain, but most of the projections show in a short-term period, you will see an increase, and in a long-term period, you will see a decrease. Essentially what this is in the short term, there'll be refurbishment of nuclear assets. And what that will cause is a supply-demand issue where the province will have to fill that supply with natural gas power generation. So In doing that, the emissions factor is increasing until that natural gas supply can be replaced with cleaner supply, which is still the long-term goal of the province. So why is this important? So in 2016, you had a climate change action plan. That was based on your energy and carbon emissions from 2011. Obviously 2011 is not in this slide, but you can fairly easily project where we were in 2011 versus where we're expected to be in 2031. And there is roughly a 4 to 5 times increase in that. So what this means is that the targets that you had set without knowing this information at the time are now much more difficult to achieve. Because if you consume the same amount of electricity in 2031 as you did in 2016 or 2011 for that matter, your subsequent emissions are way higher without you doing anything wrong. So this is a headwind essentially against you hitting those targets. I'm going to shelve this idea temporarily, but it will be reoccurring throughout the slides. Yes. Councillor Byrne. Oh.
Yeah, question, Councillor Byrne?
Through the chair, if you're okay, because I got a couple questions on this particular page. So right off the hop, who's making this prediction for the scale on the right? Is that our government, your facility, or we'll trade back and forth with them?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Byrne. This is the independent electricity system operator who manages the provincial grid. So it is a government entity making this projection. There are many projections. All of them are similar in that we see short-term increase, long-term decrease.
Yes, through the chair. So you mentioned earlier, and I like the fact that you're not tied to this agenda for net zero. You mentioned about electricity not having a negative on the usage side. Where would an arc furnace fit into that?
Can you explain a little bit further, Councillor Byrne, please?
So a large metal facility would use electric arc furnaces to make molten steel. I'm assuming that somebody's going to say that has a carbon footprint. So I just wonder where that ties in. And while I got the microphone, when you're actually generating electricity, how in this synopsis have you determined when we use what to create the electricity that's getting used at the end of the run? Because that changes dramatically, changes everything dramatically.
Thank you for the questions, Councillor Byrne. So the first question about an arc furnace, absolutely there's a carbon footprint associated with that. So it would be related to the electricity consumed. As we look at the Ontario electricity emissions factor here, that's what would be applied. There could be an argument made that there are other direct emissions as a result of the arcs as well. That would be out of scope for what we're measuring here, but you're absolutely right. There is emissions associated with that. It would be far less than doing that same sort of furnace methodology using natural gas or another fossil fuel. So that's why we see a lot of larger industrials going that route. Now, on the second question, that's an excellent question. So if we were to do this and be as accurate as possible, we would use what is called a marginal emissions factor. So for every hour of every day within the year, there is a slightly different emissions factor based on, as you mentioned, the power supply mix at that given time. Now, the only way that you can calculate this is if you have hourly data for every single facility that you want to do. So the feasibility of it is very low relative to the benefit you're going to get. So what we use here is what is called a grid average emissions factor, and we get this from a few different sources. The primary one is Canada's National Inventory Report, which is developed by Environment and Climate Change Canada. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, continue with the presentation, please.
Excellent. Next slide, please. So here we see the results of the community energy and emissions analysis. On the left side, we see energy consumption. On the right side, we see GHG emissions. There'll be a few slides with a similar format here. What to glean from these slides is residential, very, very large contributor, followed by multi-unit residential and commercial. We do have small industrial contributions. The other sector is related to rental lighting, street lighting, and a few other, they're called unmetered scattered loads. And we got this data from Hydro One. Next slide. So benchmarking. So what we attempted to do here is compare the township's results against other municipalities. So we use two metrics here, energy consumption per capita and greenhouse gas emissions per capita. So what you want to see is the lower the number, the better. And as you can see in this slide, the township is performing very well relative to the municipalities we compared against. Now, one of the things that you may glean from this is that the other regions are larger municipalities. Why would we have not compared with smaller municipalities? And it's an excellent question. The answer is we absolutely tried. That would have been ideal. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So part of the challenges with doing this is that our scope was electricity and natural gas consumption. Most of the publicly available documentation for other municipalities are broader than that. They include things like transportation fuels and solid waste emissions as well. And they typically follow what is called the Partners for Climate Protection Program, GHG protocol. So producing a report that is adherent to the Partners for Climate Protection Program, which many municipalities are doing, would give you an opportunity to make a more apples-to-apples comparison to smaller municipalities who are all reporting under this framework. I shouldn't say all, but many are reporting under this framework. So that said, some of the challenges that we faced is when we were looking at comparison municipalities, we even had to do our own data manipulation to parse out information from their reports in order to put these on a comparable scale. So this is one recommendation for consideration. The other benefit of doing this is it would help support progress tracking towards your 2031 greenhouse gas reduction targets, if those are still important to the township. Again, we are not making any assumptions. A lot of time has changed since that climate action plan.
Yeah, thank you. I had a question just with regards to the previous, I think it's maybe one further back. So, and maybe this is, I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces with the puzzle, but I was curious if, as you alluded to in the earlier graph, that, you know, in the 2016, 2017 years especially, there was a much different emission impact based on the utilization. So like theoretically, because we're in the 2023 and we're at the top of that, you know, graph where it's more impactful for the consumption because of the grid being less clean, to use it, talking in, you know, reduction. Would that mean that it's actually, you know, theoretically much better than, like, for instance, the Durham region? Because they would have that data point or energy per capita number is in a year where the grid was in essence more green or less carbon producing, if you want to call it that. And so we're now getting our reading at kind of one of the peaks or near the peak of the market. So it would be reasonable to think that the separation between, Durham's the closest, obviously, and probably the most of all three of them, the most comparable. So, and with 2013 being City of London, I can see that that's a more apples to apples comparison based on the grid implications of the emissions and carbon consumption. So is that a fair statement? I'm just trying to sort of understand it in real time for a comparison, because, you know, yes, there's a big difference, but the per capita, we're still lower, which I think is fairly reasonable. And I think everyone would probably expect that. But is it a bigger gap than it might look like because of the implications of the grid that we're basing this on?
Thank you for the question, Mayor Graham. Absolutely, yes. This is that is an impact. That is something that happens behind the scenes, and it's very wise to pick up on that as well. So as you mentioned, electricity emissions factor is increasing. I wouldn't say 2023 is at the peak. It looks like we're going to see the peak towards 2026 or a little bit beyond. That plot, I think, that was included in the second slide. As I mentioned, there's probably three or four different forecasts out there, but they do look towards 26, 27. But to your point, there is certainly a point to be made about the 2016, 2017 emissions factor being lower than 2023. It is on the increase. So it does look better, or it is a better outcome than you would see at first glance. One thing I do want to note, though, is the electricity portion of that emissions is low relative to the natural gas. And I do have some slides that will go into detail on that as well. So it is, it certainly deserves a pat on the back. But when we look at the contributions of electricity versus natural gas, it puts it into a bit more perspective.
Through the chair. So right off the hop, Durham region takes in a huge agricultural area and scopes in some other communities as well. Slightly different than what we're talking here. And I'm guessing the 2016 date is you didn't have anything more current to use for that, even though you think it's a better comparison. Am I, from what you said, I'm getting the illusion that you didn't have anything to do with their numbers. You just had to glean over them and try to clean them up. You weren't hired by them at that point either. Okay.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Byrne. Yes, that is correct. Yes, we were not involved in any of these numbers for the peer regions. We found publicly available documentation, and in most cases, these are, as I mentioned, PCP protocol greenhouse gas inventories that include far more sources, and we had to work some magic with the math to pull out the electricity and natural gas consumption. But you are absolutely right. I mean, these are different areas. They have different population densities. They have different penetration of industry. Indoor agriculture especially is an extremely large contributor, but agriculture just generally is a large contributor. So it is never a perfect comparison, but we hope that directionally that this will provide you some insight that things are looking quite good. So now what we see here are the trends from 2020 to 2023, which was our full data period. So on the energy consumption side, we see some increases, modest increases from 2020 to 2023. We see the same thing on the GHG emission side. This is not unusual at all. 2020 and 2021 were very abnormal years. For every municipality, energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions were down. This is a slide that you should not be concerned about because essentially 2022 and 2023 are the normal levels, and you essentially don't see any increase between those years. On the GHG emission side, you do a little bit, and this is because of the emissions factor changing primarily. So one thing I want to point out here is the split between natural gas and electricity on the energy side. It is almost 50-50, 54% natural gas energy, 46% electricity. But if you look at the GHG emission side, 77% natural gas, 23% electricity. So this data point it goes back to our earlier conversation about the amount of GHG per unit of energy consumed, and that being natural gas is far higher than electricity. So what it does is it forces you to think about fuel switching away from natural gas as a primary means to decarbonize for any municipality, for any organization. So an example of this that I will revisit a few times is a very simple one, and that is you have a natural gas furnace and you have an electric alternative being an air source heat pump. And switching from the natural gas furnace to the air source heat pump will greatly reduce your carbon emissions for that facility. However, there are some drawbacks, and we will talk about those as well. Yes, Councillor Byrne.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Through the chair. So when I look at this graphing, right off the hop, I'm trying to figure out why you picked the baseline so far back in 2011. Who set that baseline? Who's setting the goal for 2031? Is it some federal thing that you're looking at there? But the other question it begs is, over the course of 2020 to the date today, how do you adjust for the influx of population that this township is taking on? And that creates the burden, and it looks like we're not really gaining anything, but we're taking on a whole lot more individuals that create the issue.
Thank you for the questions, Councillor Byrne. Great point on the population, and I will speak to that. As far as the baseline, so this was not something that we selected. This 2011 baseline, this was the baseline emissions in your I believe publicly available climate change action plan. So that was the date of the year that was used. The 2031 goal is we took your percentage reduction target that you had set for 2031, and we had applied that equally across electricity, natural gas, to give you an idea of where you would need to be with electricity and natural gas consumption in order to hit that goal. So none of these numbers were generated by Alatico. We were just taking them from your reports. And on the point about population increase, this is one of the true challenges about decarbonization. All decarbonization goals are absolute. They are not per capita goals. So this is a major challenge that makes it difficult if you have a growing municipality. So there is no easy answer to that. The net zero targets that many municipalities are adopting, or the 80% reduction by 2040 or 2050, these are completely irrespective of population increase. We have a baseline year, regardless of what happens, we will hit this goal. And what we are going to see in our personal opinion is a lot of municipalities realizing how difficult this is going to be in practice, and how expensive it is going to be. And the impact of the carbon tax changing is going to be a extreme variable that changes the economics of going to things like heat pumps, which is one of the largest drivers of decarbonization. So as far as the community, how can you work towards hitting this target if you're interested in doing that? And we've grouped these into a few different categories: education and awareness, incentives and financial support, programs and implementation support. I'm not going to speak through all of these, but the one I do want to point out is the heat pump incentive program. As I mentioned, I'll probably say heat pumps way too many times today, just because it is one of the single largest drivers of decarbonization. This is fuel switching water heating and space heating, natural gas fired systems to electric systems. And this is more efficient than doing it with things like electric resistance baseboards, okay, that are extremely expensive. So heat pump incentive programs, this is essentially adding a municipal incentive adder on top of the currently existing provincial programs. That is through the ISO and Enbridge. There are some programs currently available. So we're seeing some of this adoption happen naturally with those existing programs. But what we are seeing also is that it will be necessary to have fairly deep penetration of heat pumps in order to achieve these targets. And that's the unfortunate reality is these are not inexpensive, and there are some drawbacks, especially in colder climates. Air source heat pumps cannot produce a lot of heat when we get to -15, -20. So essentially you still require a backup heating system, whether that be electric, whether that be natural gas. And the truth is, operationally, they're going to cost you more to operate as well. So it's not even like you can say we pay a little bit more capital and we save operationally. Unfortunately, the economics are not there for that. And unfortunately, it just got even worse with the change of the carbon tax. Next slide, please. So now we're moving to corporate. So on the corporate side, we're seeing energy on the left side again, and GHG emissions on the right side. And we have this broken down by facility now. So we're showing data tags for the 6 largest contributors. If we showed them all, no one would want to look at this slide. We have lots of small contributors here as well. The largest, the CMCC next door in the wastewater treatment plants. We also have the municipal office, Roads Depot, Old Millbrook School, and the Old Community Center here as well. Combined, these account for roughly 85% of your energy and emissions just in these 6 facilities.
I believe.
Thank you, Chair. It's for the slide back, but doesn't really matter to show it. But you do talk about the heat pump incentive programs, and we've all seen the provincial ones, and we all get bombarded with LG and everybody else putting them out there. But you did mention municipal incentive programs as well. And have you seen municipal incentive programs out there? What sort of options are available?
Thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor. The short answer is we've seen a lot of talk about them. We haven't seen them implemented widely. And we believe that municipalities are going to have to make a decision if they are serious about hitting their decarbonization targets, because we feel that this is one that will be necessary, especially with the operational cost of heat pumps being higher than natural gas. It is a tough pill to swallow for anyone to pay more for something and then continuously pay more for it. So that's the short answer.
Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair, I'd just like to emphasize too, and it's like any other new technology coming along, the reliability of heat pumps are notoriously poor right now. And that could change in the next 10 years, much like high efficiency gas furnaces were notoriously costly in the first 10 years of their existence. And so again, at this point in time, even the concept that you're going to switch to electric heat pumps really boils back to where do we generate the electricity? And that changes the whole dynamics of this provincially, right?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Byrne. Yes, absolutely. And one of the benefits of going to fully electric heat pumps is that you do have the option to install your own generation in the form of solar PV. However, then the cost goes up substantially. And of course, the sun is an intermittent resource, and then you'll need energy storage as well. So then the costs, again, become a major issue. So there's no easy solution to this. And one of the points that we really want to drive home with this presentation is that achieving these goals have real challenges. primarily economic, but as you mentioned as well, Councillor Byrne, technical as well.
Follow. Can't take.
Through the chair. Yeah, and this is going to relate to your next slide too, but in this, you refer to the old community center. I'm thinking we're talking the hockey rink at the bottom of the hill in Millbrook. Is that what we're talking about, the old community center? Yeah, okay. The new hockey rink, the new community center, I was under the impression that we built that was like state of the art. It was supposed to be, you know, LED lightings. In the beginning, we didn't know how to turn them off. We're going to use the floor heating, which hasn't really proved out to be what it was expected to be, but it's better than it's reusing some of the wasted heat. And it still scores poorly. So I kind of.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Byrne. And I would say we haven't been in that facility as part of this scope, so I can't really comment on the facility systems. It certainly could be state of the art. I'd love to be invited in to go see it. But I think just from an energy intensity standpoint, that type of facility in general is of course going to consume a lot more than other types. So what we're seeing here for a municipality of your size does not stand out to us as being a poor performer. I don't want you to take this graph as it being a poor performer per se. It's just a large contributor due to its nature.
Through the chair back. When I look at this benchmark, Energy Star, if I got this right, that's the US federal agency that kind of lays out a framework and a whole scope of information and kind of comes up with some kind of policy. But that's what we're benchmarking to.
Thanks, Councillor Byrne. So yes, this is Energy Star benchmark. However, they do have a Canadian benchmarks as well. So we are using basically, Energy Star has a system called Portfolio Manager, and broader public sector organizations submit their data for their facilities through this portal. Energy Star aggregates it based on facility type, and they produce these benchmarks for these specific types of facilities. This is all measured on a energy per square meter basis. So one thing I do want to be very clear about in benchmarks is they do not tell the whole story. They absolutely do not. So within Canada, of course, you have different climate zones. And for these types of facilities, weather is going to be the single biggest factor of energy consumption by a wide margin. So you will have contributions from very cold climates and climates that are much, much warmer than this as well. So benchmarking in general is the first step. It does not replace an energy audit. It doesn't know anything about the facility systems. So what we wanted to get across with this slide is this should give you an idea where your facilities are performing to the average. However, there can be various explanations: hours of occupancy, unique systems in the facility, heating and cooling set points. Like it varies considerably. So I hope that answers your question. Next slide, please. So we have a similar trend plots here, energy on the left side, GHG emissions on the right side for corporate facilities. Again, reiterating on the energy side, we have very close to a 50-50 split between natural gas and electricity. But if you look at how that flows through to emissions, 71% natural gas. If we look at the trends, we see 2020 and 2021, we see this increase after COVID restrictions are easing up, and we actually start to see a decrease after that. And through our analysis, this seemed to be from a decrease in consumption at both the Cavan Monaghan Community Centre and the Old Community Centre. That's what our data analysis showed. Now, one thing that we found very interesting is the gap between where you are in 2023 and the 2031 goal is roughly 230 tons of CO2e. That just so happens to be exactly what the Cavan Monaghan Community Centre emissions are. So what to glean from this is that in order to hit the 2031 goal, if you are building new facilities, they would need to be like this shows the imperative of low carbon facilities and or net zero facilities. Again, a challenge, a large cost to do as well, because this would imply that you would not have natural gas heating systems in any of these facilities. So waste heat recovery in certain facilities where it's feasible makes a lot of sense. As you mentioned, LED lighting, things like these proven efficient technologies are almost essential now, and I think they're fairly baseline at this point. But we thought this was an interesting data point to show that between 2011, where the Cabin Monthan Community Center did not exist, and 2023, you can see that increase between the Cabin Monthan Community Center is roughly 230 tons, which is essentially what is needed to hit your target right now. It's essentially, if you want to think about it in a short term, it's removing the equivalent of a Cabin Monthan Community Center to hit that 2031 goal. So it is not easy.
Councilor Burn?
Through the chair. So on that point, if you ever tried to take the British Thermal Unit BTU composite of natural gas and do something similar to making ice with electricity, it gets exponentially out of whack too, correct? And I just wonder about this in the long run, because we're always talking about getting things more efficient. People got suckered into throwing out a fridge that worked to buy a Energy Star fridge. They went into debt to buy the fridge. The fridge wears out in a 7 or 8 year period. Their old fridge would have still been working. Like, the cost to the average person, it's just dramatic. And then if you just subsidize it with tax money to try to pretend it's cheaper, it just doesn't balance out in my mind. So I don't know how you rationalize that moving forward.
Thank you for the comments, Councillor Brennan. I can't disagree with you. Alatico is a group of energy professionals, engineers, technical folks. We see the economics every day, and we see the technical side as well. And every municipality will struggle with this. There will be no exceptions whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think what I garnered the most from a lot of the presentation, like, again, it's in a bit of a vacuum. It's not about a fiscal, there's no fiscal components to it. It's just, this is the brass tacks, this is the consumption, these are the metrics. But I think I hope people take from it that review it is that the grid, the efficiencies in the grid and the improvements in the production of the energy that we're using is really going to be the catalyst to help us make these. So the one thing I was kind of curious from garnering from each of the slides is, well, if the grid becomes, if exceeds those or reaches those targets, does that mean, like you said, you're 230 tons. Well, if the grid becomes that much more efficient and we're not, if we don't maybe change everything that we're doing necessarily to make inroads, as the grid overall improves with its cleanliness, let's just use that word. I'm curious if we've ever extrapolated where we'll be. Like, if the grid reaches the efficiencies and cleanliness that we're expecting, be it nuclear or otherwise, again, not in our realm of influence, but I'm just curious, like, does it actually, to your point, you're not going to be able to hit them without the grid being a significant contributor to allowing the usage that you're utilizing to be cleaner. So is that like, was that ever part of your work, or maybe it's just a takeaway in future? It'd be curious to know, because you don't want to Councilor Burns' point, you don't want to change necessarily the costs about full conversions, et cetera. Not to say that they're not, in some cases, there's a business case to be made and you're trying to improve on a moral stand ground for environmental purposes. I get that, but it's curious to know how much of that grid improvement will improve your current standing and current utilization. Because, to the point being, people want community centers, they want additional amenities. It's just a natural, you need to add things, even the fire hall. It's probably not reflected in 2030, but you need a bigger fire hall because of growth, et cetera. So you're not going to not build the things you need. You try to, pick your, balance of being what you can afford and trying to make it as efficient as possible. But I'm curious, knowing, like, from a 2023 standpoint, if that's the year we're reporting on, is there an ability with ease to maybe email council back and say, well, if the grid by 2031 or whatever future point, hits, and I know they're all different, the targets are different or the projections are different, but it would be curious to know, instead of it being such a negative, like, you got to pay all this money and it's going to cost extra every year, if the grid achieves its objectives or improves on its deliverables and cleanliness, where are we? Because to me, that's what the justification is, to not go changing the entire way we do things and incurring those additional upfront costs and additional operational costs. But, if the grid and the provision can become more efficient, then we are on track, despite growth, et cetera.
Thank you for the questions, Mr. Mayor. And I think it is a multifaceted question. I will say first that it was not in our scope to look at that. However, I can comment on it. And if we look at, for example, the 2023 emissions plot, 29% of that is electricity. So if we assume the grid is entirely clean, being zero emissions factor, which is not reasonable. However, it's easy for an exercise. We can reduce that bar by roughly 29%. You're getting somewhat close to that 2031 goal. I think the issue we're seeing here is that the goal is set for 2031, but the decrease the province is expecting far beyond that. So this is where a lot of 2040, 2050 goals, as long as they're not too extreme, these are not as risky as or as difficult to achieve, I would say, than a shorter term goal with how much this electricity emissions factor is really escalating in the short term. That's the bottom line on that.
Through you, Chair. Just a couple of comments. One being, I guess another way of looking at it slightly would be if we normalize the 2031 goal to today's grid, right, and brought it up, and then we could see a little bit more proportionally where we stand as a point in time shot, right? And second, the point of this study was to kind of get us in a position where we understood where we were, because up until now we had no clue. Like I think the 2011 was the first time that we calculated, and I think staff did an amazing job of using a spreadsheet and the best knowledge that they could, and they got it. They got a number, right? Where now we've gone in a lot more depth. We've understood it. We understand where the numbers are coming from. We understand how to keep mapping it, you know, so we can keep track of where we are in relative to where we're supposed to be. So that to me was the point of this, not to solve the problem and not to figure out where we needed to change light bulbs, but now we can think about it and figure out where we can focus on our energies, literally and pun intended. Thank you.
Yeah, fair point. Deputy Mayor, we just did. Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair. So to speak to the idea of the grid being something special somewhere down the road, the last week has shown us that I'm really happy that the net zero lunatics haven't got their way. I'm scared at how many people might have died, how much livestock might have died in the last week and going forward in some areas if we weren't at such a opportunity with the fossil fuels that we have available to keep the lights on for the short period, right? And this idea that somehow solar and wind, well, they both shut down for the period of the ice storm. They were worthless, right? This concept that maybe someday we'll have battery storage, that's possible down the road somewhere. Hydrogen may be somewhere down the road. But realistically, right now, we still have to survive and grow. Well, how much we grow here is another issue too. But I really don't think that this concept that wind and solar are going to be the saviors. In my own personal estimation, large solar farms and the unsightly windmills on the horizon are in common with a lot of politicians. On their very best day, they're only about 20% efficient, and over half the time they're totally useless. Like, we just can't count on them. I just don't want to see us get into a position where we have to declimatize, right, and jeopardize our way of life.
Thank you for the comments, Councillor Byrne. I can't disagree. We think that the way that the province's power supply is going to go is there will be an increase in renewables. However, in the best case scenario, and this may be controversial as well, there may be more nuclear in the province. Hydroelectric, you can only build so many dams. You have to have feasibility for it. Nuclear can essentially go in. As long as you have a water supply, it can go in those areas. So that is considered a very clean, low emitting power source. So I think in the long term, perhaps we have an increase in nuclear supply, and it's extremely reliable. So perhaps that's where we get to this low carbon energy supply in the future. But I can't disagree. There is a lot of concern about especially wind power, and you're not wrong on the technical side either. So we'll have to wait and see. That's the bottom line with this. We can't really hang our hats on this becoming a zero emission grid in 2040, 2050. This is what the projections currently show, though. We know things can change pretty quick as policy does, so we'll hang tight and see. And just returning to your comments, Deputy Mayor, as well. You're absolutely correct. That is essentially what we wanted to do. Provide you with the data, provide you with the insights. We're completely impartial. And this tool that we generated for you as well allows you to enter data every year. And it will actually, these plots in specific, it will add the plots every year. You'll be able to track this. You'll be able to break it down by corporate facility, all of the pie charts. Everything is at your fingertips now. And we'll be providing support for that next year as well, and some training to get you through that. So that really was the driver behind this work.
Councilor Byrne?
Yes, through the chair. One thing I wanted to ask earlier and I forgot to. When we were talking about north-south of the border and the Energy Star, and you alluded a little bit with climate, if I looked across Canada from east to west, not going north into where the really extreme temperatures, are those same projections going to be relatively close, or would you see differences that might seem extreme?
Are you talking projections about the electricity emissions factor? I would say it varies. I mean, some provinces are already in an even better spot than we are in Ontario, like Quebec and BC being very heavily dominated hydroelectric. So it does vary, I would say. I think most provincial governments want to say that we will have a cleaner grid 20 years from now, and they don't want to go out and say, regardless of party, they don't want to go out and say we are fighting for a dirtier electricity grid. So, but it does vary. Thank you. Next slide, please. So on the corporate side, so our proposed initiatives for consideration, this is very much like a framework as opposed to, a list of programs like we had for the community side. And within this framework, it's a 5-step framework. The first is conducting audits at key facilities. So this would be your largest contributors and or the ones that perform poorly on the benchmark. So you can dig in to see if that benchmark is actually giving you accurate insights, or if it's perhaps just not as representative. So this has already begun. We actually completed a energy audit at the Old Millbrook School several weeks ago, and we had issued the draft report last week. So following that, it would be implementing the energy efficiency measures that we have proposed within those audits. And we always prioritize the low cost, fast payback measures. Most of the time, these are lighting controls, HVAC controls. We will propose capital replacements if they make sense, but most of the time, economically, you're doing these at end of life. If you want to go to a high efficiency boiler, you're not going to replace your existing boiler when it still has 5 to 10 years left. It makes no economic sense. So what we would suggest is consider the report's findings when you are up for replacement, and perhaps spend a little extra to get a high efficiency model, and the total cost of that unit over time will be lower. The third, which we've talked quite a bit about, is retrofitting heating systems to low carbon alternatives. So in order to hit these decarbonization targets, this will be necessary. So this is the idea of, for example, a natural gas furnace going to an air source heat pump system. The fourth is pursuing renewable generation. In most cases, this is solar PV. What this will allow you to do is basically ignore the Ontario electricity emissions projection, that plot we saw earlier on, because you will essentially be generating your own electricity at 0 emissions factor. So that's the logic there. If you don't have space on site, or it is not feasible for any other reasons, there are other mechanisms like power purchase agreements. You've likely heard of carbon credits or renewable energy credits. So this is a mechanism to achieve carbon reductions. It is costly, and some would argue that it is essentially cheating, because there is a way where you can not do anything technology-wise and purchase these credits and hit your goals, but it is not the ideal route to do it. So we have it very late in this framework. It's supposed to tackle the balance. If you can get very close through technology and tackle the balance with renewables and PPAs, then that is a good route to go. And then finally, and this is an important point, leveraging reductions in other sectors. So what I mean by this is, in 2016, your climate change action plan considered other sectors, including transportation as well. So you had a certain amount of emissions in 2011, and then you had a % reduction that you wanted to meet by 2031. What we did is we took that % reduction and we applied it to electricity and natural gas. That does not mean the bars that we are showing you here is your target for electricity and natural gas. You didn't have a target for electricity and natural gas. You had it as a whole. So the only approach we could take to at least give you some insight is to apply that target across all sectors evenly. Now, the reason we make this point is because decarbonizing transportation is more cost effective than decarbonizing buildings. And what I mean by this is if you have, for example, a light duty fleet vehicle and you electrify a fleet vehicle, it will still be more expensive upfront, don't get me wrong. However, operating costs, typically the total cost of ownership will be lower with electric, typically, not always. Whereas if we look at buildings and we talk about this heat pump example again, you're paying more capital and more operating. So the point we're making here is that you could overachieve in one sector and underachieve in another sector and still hit your target. Next slide, please. So just to close out, and I think this will be reiterating a lot of things that I touched on, completing both a updated community and corporate GHG inventory could be beneficial. It will allow you to do a better comparison against municipalities because you would be reporting on a protocol and a framework that is common, and it includes all of your emission sources. So there are publicly available documents from many municipalities that follow this approach. And the key consideration here is transportation. That is one thing that was not in this scope, but it is a large contributor to an emissions profile. And then finally, investments will be required to achieve the CCAP targets. So facility audits will inform opportunities. So this was the first step in our decarbonization framework. And as I mentioned, natural gas reductions or electrification measures are going to have the largest impact. There's not really any way around that. To be successful in getting these types of projects approved or making these projects attractive in any way, there must be a value put on a GHG reduction target, because if you look at these projects purely economic, they will always lose. And we want to be very transparent about that. So if you have, again, reiterating, natural gas furnace, air source heat pump, there will be it should not be considered a financial investment, because currently the way the utility prices are and where the carbon tax currently is, there is no reason to believe you'll be getting a return on that investment. And then finally, the future emissions factors for the Ontario electricity grid, there's still some uncertainty on this. So I don't want to leave everyone with the impression that that slide we saw on slide 2 with the projections is set in stone. It is absolutely not. By later this year, that could look different. Many things can change with that. The consensus currently, if we look at all of the projections that are available, is the same. Short-term increase, long-term decrease. So this makes short-term targets like a 2031 target more difficult to achieve, but longer-term targets not impacted quite as much. And that is all.
Councilor Bird?
Through the chair, it got mentioned, but it's not really part of your scope, I guess, but try to explain to me, the one thing that makes sense to me is better insulation, right? That's one thing that makes sense. I don't understand why in the last 6 or 7 years, the cost to insulate has dramatically got screwed up. I don't really see that as a fundamental of the industry. And if the demand is great on any one thing, you should see it the opposite trend, where the demand justifies a whole lot more production, which should bring down the cost. All we're seeing, if you go anywhere, is the cost to insulate. It's just outpaced everything else.
Thanks for the comments, Councillor Bernin. We've seen about the same. I don't know how to explain why it's happening. However, I know in our audit reports, we very rarely suggest an increase in insulation, because the payback will say something like 25, 30 years, if that, on a simple payback. And by that time, you're looking at new insulation again. So it's even with window measures, I mean, the logic between insulation and windows is the same. You have less heat gain, less heat loss. However, to justify those capital upgrades on energy savings alone, you will not be able to do it. If you need windows already and you can leverage an incremental cost to go to a high efficiency window or an increased level of insulation, absolutely. But to call it an energy project is tough.
Seeing no other questions, Taylor, thanks very much for the presentation. I appreciate it being an unbiased and like Deputy Mayor Huntley said, it's good to know where we are because that's really the catalyst here. And it's very clear from, I think it's very helpful. We know this is a really fast-paced changing industry and I think the pressure's on and, you know, there's also that danger of getting in at the forefront when the improvements come so fast and furious. But it's very clear that, you know, we know where we are now. And that we can't potentially reach those targets without a lot of help and a lot of innovation that hopefully will come our way because, and to a lot of the discussion, there's a price point factor as well that we're always trying to be conscientious of. But thanks for the great presentation and all the great work, and we look forward to continue working with you and keeping track of our progress on the issue. So thank you very much for the presentation. Can I get a motion of council for receiving that delegation and presentation moved by Councillor Natchoff, seconded by Councillor Byrne? All in favor? That is approved. Thanks again, Taylor, for all your hard work, and we'll see you again, I'm sure. On to the next, we have the minutes of the regular council meeting held March 17th, 2025. Can I get a motion for those minutes? Moved by Councillor Burns, second by Deputy Mayor Huntley. All in favor? That is approved. Next, we have the minutes from Motor Valley Trails Advisory Committee meeting, minutes of January 27th and February 24th meetings. Can I get a mover for those minutes to be approved as presented? Councillor Byrne and Councillor Edgerton, all in favor? That is approved. We next have the Cavan Wanigan Public Library Board minutes of January 21st. Can I get a motion to receive those for information? Moved by Councillor Natchoff, seconded by Deputy Mayor Huntley. All in favor? That is approved. And lastly, we have the Municipal Revitalization and Heritage Advisory Committee meeting minutes from February 20th. Can I get a motion to approve those as presented? Moved by Councillor Edgerton, seconded by Councillor Byrne. All in favor? Those are approved. Next, we finally get to the reports section of our meeting. Kyle Phillips, Building 2025-14 Development Statistics First Quarter.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the rest of the council, recommendation for the report before you is that council receive building department report 2025-14 Development Statistics First Quarter 2025 for information.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Questions with regards to the report? Councillor Byrne.
Through the chair to Kyle. Where do you actually get the value? Is it coming from Impact or you guys coming up with, who comes up with that value to put in that report?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Byrne, good question. And yeah, it is what it is for a number to look at because when we get a building permit application, we can't, there's certain fields that we can't change. So it's really up to them to self-report the applicants. So that number on any given house can be all over the place, especially when a lot of municipalities use that number to dictate what their permit fees are. We don't like to do that because it's never accurate. You could have a simple kitchen that goes from $10,000 to $150,000, and we don't want to charge more for something that we're looking at the exact same. So that's self-reporting by the applicant.
Any other questions? If not, I believe the recommendation is to receive that Q1 report for information. Moved by Councillor Byrne, seconded by Councillor Natchoff. All in favor? That is approved. So thank you, Ms. Page. So there is an additional attachment that we're going to be adding to 11.2 in the report. Can I get a motion to add that? Councillor Byrne, seconded by Councillor Natchoff. All in favor? That is approved. So now we are on 11.2, the revised report from Mr. Phillips, 2025-15 Corporate and Community Energy Emissions Report.
I get the quick part on this through you, Mayor, to council. The recommendation for report for you is that council receive building department report 2025-15 corporate and community energy and emissions report for information. And I just really want to thank Taylor and his team for helping us through this. It's been very informative through the process and especially today.
Thank you. Get a motion for that. Question with regards to the report, Councillor Byrne.
Through the chair to Kyle. So this, I'm trying to figure out how this moves forward. I guess you're going to stay in the wings. The staff is going to take over some of the adjustments as we move forward. Is that kind of where we're heading?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Byrne. Yep, good question. So Taylor and his team are still for a reporting tool that we have mandatory reporting annually that we have to do. So this tool is going to help us a lot, both in reporting every year and tracking. So Taylor and his team have a year-long helping us through that process, making sure it's working right, making sure we're understanding it. That's on the reporting mechanism. As far as the other part, their scope is complete as of right now, but we will be looking for any further energy audits that we do. We may be utilizing Taylor and his team. Obviously, they do a great job, and we've done the Old Millbrook School, and they've already found thousands in savings that we can do with the things such as LED and HVAC controls that are just operational things. So right now, this scope is complete. Our report's done, so that's how we'll be moving forward, if that makes sense.
Thanks for that, Mr. Phillips. Can I get a motion for the report if there's no other information? So we're just receiving it for information. Councilor Byrne, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hunley. All in favor? That is approved. Next, we have Mr. Wilkinson with regards to planning 2025-17 JKR Realty Temporary Use Agreement Pickleball Courts. Matt.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Planning report number 2025-17 recommends that council approve bylaw number 2025-20 to authorize the execution of a temporary use agreement between JKR Realty Limited and the Corporation of Township of Monaghan to permit a temporary use agreement for the pickleball courts. Thank you.
Any questions about this? With regards to that, we'll just look for a motion to, the bylaw number 2025-20 be approved to authorize the execution of a temporary use agreement for JKR Realty Limited and the Corporation of the Township of Monaghan. Moved by Councilor Byrne, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hunley. All in favor? That is approved. Thank you, Matt. You're up again with regards to planning 2025-18, 988 County Road 10, removal of holding symbol.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To you, to members of council and the public. Planning report 2025-18 recommends that bylaw 2025-21 be approved to remove the holding symbol from the urban residential 1 subzone A exception 6 holding 13 zone as it pertains to the portion of lot at 988 County Road 10.
Thanks, Matt. Question, Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to, I guess, the chair maybe even, it was brought up at an earlier meeting just a little while ago about the need possibly, if we go to this extra 1,500 homes possibly coming to this township for a water tower. And I brought up at the time about the idea that the highest ground they looked at was out behind us right here. Moving forward on this thing today, does that impact the possibility of saving something in the future for this possible water tower if we ever get to the point where we need it?
Ms. Hurley, would you like to speak to that?
Through you, Chair, to Councilor Byrne. No, it doesn't. This property was looked at. I did talk to Mr. Hancock about any additional properties or the area around the municipal office. And it's my understanding from the consultant that this is not a location for the potential new sandpipe.
Thank you, Ms. Hurley. Seeing no other questions, the recommendation in the report is that bylaw number 2025-21 be approved to remove the holding symbol H13 from the urban residential 1 subzone A exception 6 holding 13 UR 1-A-6-H13 zone as it pertains to parts 1, 2, and 3 of plan of 45 R-17774 in part of lot 12 concession 6 cabin. And I got a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Deputy Mayor Hunley, seconded by Councilor Natchoff. All in favor? That is approved. Next, we have planning 2025-19 Station Park Sign Project. Ms. Ayad is speaking to this, I believe.
Thank you, Mayor. The report before council is Planning Department 2025-19 Station Park Signage Project. The recommendation is that council authorize the Municipal Revitalization and Heritage Advisory Committee, also known as Mr. Hack, to proceed with a railway switch signal design concept for Station Park.
Thank you, Ms. Ayad. So they've included an image here. We're going to scroll to that just so we all know what we're talking about. Okay, Councilor Byrne, question?
Through the chair to, I guess, I look at that. I'm no artistic talent whatsoever, but it just bothers me. The image itself doesn't, I don't know, with the small child in hand, the cut up the center of it goes way past this way. It seemed goofy to me at my personal level. I just wonder, is that hard and fast? Is that what they've come up with for the sign to look like?
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Byrne. I'm not sure I understand the question. Are you asking about the height, or are you? Through you, Chair, to Councillor Byrne, it is a conceptual design. We'll probably kind of massage it a little bit, but this is just to give you an idea.
Yeah, and this is within the jurisdiction of Mr. Hack committee, so this is what they're working with. But yeah, my only comment would be, I would think that the marker plaque could be bigger. I mean, I don't know why we're putting a QR code at a bottom maybe, but maybe I'm misinterpreting it. But if you were looking for feedback, I think that, you know, if you're going to go to the investment to make a sign, you know, we could potentially use more space on the actual placard for all of the purposes. But again, that's just comments. You know, Mr. Hack has the jurisdiction over this and they can do what they believe is appropriate. Ms. Hurley, any questions on that or comments?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. No, not really. I just wanted to support Bridget in the aspect that this is a concept plan only. Mr. Hack is looking at it and there will definitely be some tweaking. We don't want you to get stuck on the color or anything like that. It is a concept plan. It's just to show a new design possibly instead of the signage process or program that we were originally at.
Very good. Thank you for that. Deputy Mayor?
Through you, Chair, Mr. Hack and Bridget, I guess. I think the concept is very cool. I think you've done a great job of, you know, forming, you know, the role, which seemed to get added around for a few years into something that really is representative of that area. So congratulations.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. With that, can we get a motion that council authorize the Municipal Revitalization and Heritage Advisory Committee to proceed with a rail switch signal design concept for Station Park? Moved by Deputy Mayor Huntley, seconded by Councillor Edgerton. All in favor? That is approved. Next report is Public Works tendered PW 25-01 slurry seal. Mr. Hutchison is here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to council. Before you, we have Public Works report 2025-06 with recommendations regarding the Public Works slurry seal tender T-PW-25-01. The recommendations before you are as follows. Recommendation 1 is that council award the slurry seal tender T-PW-25-01 to Miller Paving Limited at the tender amount of $277,748.00. The total amount with net municipal HST is $282,636.36. And recommendation 2, that council approve a 10% contingency in the amount of $28,263.64 for this project. The total amount for approval, including contingency, is $310,900. The slurry seal program of $360,000 was approved in the 2025 capital budget and is funded through the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund.
Thanks, Drew. So we came in a little bit better than forecast and budgeted for on the tender. That's always good news. Any questions? If not, we're looking for a motion for those recommendations. Moved by Deputy Mayor Huntley. Oh, sorry, that's a question. Excuse me, Deputy Mayor.
Through you, Chair, more of a suggestion than a question. Because I love that we've evolved to the point we do include the map now so we can see exactly what it is. But there's the maps where there's really no context to the map. It's a section of a road with intersections on it. So it just makes it really kind of hard to decipher where exactly portion is being done. Right, but if you look at some of them, like you have no idea what those crossroads are, right? So it makes it really kind of hard to figure out where it is. Like if you look at the report that's coming up for the occupancy, like some roads are actually highlighted very quickly. What the other roads, right? So you can kind of in the context of where that stretch of road actually is. If that makes any sense, the suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, staff can take that under consideration. Any other questions? Being none, look for a motion that council award the slurry seal tender CT/PW 25-01 DeMiller Paving Limited at the tender amount of $277,748 with HST of $36,107.24. The total tender amount with net municipal HST is $282,636.36. And that council approve a 10% contingency in the amount of $28,263.64 for this project. The total amount for the approval, including contingencies, is $310,900. The slurry seal program of $360,000 was approved in the 2025 capital budget and is funded through the OCIF. I get a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councilor Edgerton, seconded by Deputy Mayor Huntley. All in favor? That is approved. Drew, one more time with Public Works 2025-07 surface treatment tender.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to council, before you, we have Public Works Report 2025-07 with recommendations regarding the Public Works Surface Treatment Tender T-PW-25-02. The recommendations before you are as follows. Recommendation 1 is that council award the surface treatment tender T-PW-25-02 to Dufferin Construction Company at the tender amount of $348,992.00. The total tender amount with net municipal HST is $355,134.26. And recommendation 2 is that council approves a 10% contingency in the amount of $35,513.43 for this project. The total amount for approval, including contingencies, is $390,647.69. The surface treatment program of $437,000 was approved in the 2025 capital budget. Thanks.
Thanks, Drew. More good news, again, under budget. That sounds good, but we'll see where we end up. Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to Drew, I have several questions, so I'll tackle them one site at a time, and starting with Brown Line. I'm just curious, we're going to end short of getting to the railroad track. The railroad track makes it's not our property. So that little piece of land between where we're going to stop now and the railroad crossing, does it make sense to admit that now and then have to do that somewhere down the road? Or would it make more sense to go right up to the railroad property now and have that section finished?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councilor Byrne. When we were looking at Brown Line, we were knowing to do the whole section of the road or the whole section of Brown Line. It would be over kind of a 2-year period. So we did try to split it kind of in half for that. It could be an option to go right to the railway, like you said. And we can look into that. We're not held with the sections we've chosen right now. We can always take a little bit off one road this year and add it to Brown Line or switch it around a little bit. So we can look into that.
Follow up, Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair back to Drew. To me, that would make sense just because it's a natural cut anyways, rather than having chunks that might be years before they get finished up. The next one I was going to ask about, the 13th, what they now call Wilson Line, going west of the County Road 10. That hill was put in real pavement years ago, and it stood up very well because it's a sharp little bend coming off of Main Road. It looks from the diagram that we're going to hard top, over top, or cut up some of that and go right up past that group of homes farther up, which I don't have a problem with. I'm just wondering how you're going to treat that hill. And before we do this, are we going to look at the width when you get to the crest of that hill where we have a series of guardrails? They had an incident there in the last year. It is a narrow stretch. There's no guide wires put back on those poles that are on the edge of the road over quite an embankment. Is there any talk or any thought to how you're going to improve that section of road before we go and resurface it?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councilor Byrne. the first part of the question, going up the hill, our plan is it's called a mill and pave. So we would mill a thin layer of the asphalt, which makes it uniform across. There is minor cracking in the current asphalt, so we wouldn't need to tear it all up, but the mill and pave would allow us to, like I said, make it uniform across, kind of smooth out any of the wheel tracks that occur over a number of years. And then putting the surface treatment on top of it seals the road from any cracks. Part of the big issue that we do have once asphalt starts to crack is the water getting in between it a little bit. So doing the overlay of surface treatment would seal it from any water or rain getting through it, and then expanding and causing the road to blow out during freeze and thaw.
Follow-up, Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair back to Drew. So in that first few hundred feet, probably 250 or 300 feet, there is some asphalt curbing there that stood up remarkably well. I didn't think it'd stand up at all when they put it in, but up until this last year, it's held up reasonably well. How do you plan to incorporate that, or is that going to be eliminated, or what are you thinking there?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne, we would maintain the asphalt curbing. Like you had mentioned, it has held up pretty well, and I don't think there's a need to remove it. We can get the milling done without having to touch those curbs.
Follow-up?
Through the chair back to Drew. The next point I was going to bring out, over at Hillview and Skyview. Skyview is still in pretty good shape when you look at the rest of the township. But on Hillview, there's at least one section, I guess it's going to be similar. It's actual pavement that Kawartha Lakes did when they built that subdivision on their side of the road. And I'm just wondering how that all works in, because this stretch of road we're taking as our full responsibility, even though Kawartha Lakes is on the opposite side. We've still talked in the past about how to share things as far as garbage pickup and recycling. But when you're doing that Skyview, the condition it's in right now, is it justifiable to redo?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne. Just to start, we are doing the section of Hillview jointly with the city of Kawartha Lakes. We have included funding in both of our budgets to do that. So it is split 50-50 for that work. The main part or the main issue with Skyview is all of the cracking that has occurred. So yes, it would be similar. We would do a mill and pave, and it caps it. So then the structural aspect of the asphalt is still there and upholding, but it would be a new surface to drive on. And then the following year, we would do the slurry sealed with the final cap for that section of road.
Thanks, Drew. Follow-up? Okay, any other questions, members of council? Seeing none, I have to read this in totality, so I will try to do it quickly. That council award the surface treatment tender TPW 25-02 to Dufferin Construction Company at the tender amount of $348,992 with HST of $45,368.96. The total tender amount with the net municipal HST is $355,134.26. And that council approves a 10% contingency in the amount of $35,513.43 for this project. The total amount for approval, including contingencies, is $390,647.69. The surface treatment program of $437,000 was approved in the 2025 capital budget. Mover and a seconder, moved by Deputy Mayor Huntley, seconded by Councillor Byrne. All in favor? That is approved. All right, moving on. Ms. Ayyett, ECD 2025 road occupancy permits for 2025 special events.
Thank you, Mayor. The report before council is ECD 2025-02, road occupancy permits for 2025 special events. This is a standard report that comes before council annually. The recommendation is that council authorize staff to issue road occupancy permits for special events on county roads in the township for events, festivals in 2025 as outlined in the table in the report. And the second recommendation is that the Township of Cavan provide a certificate of insurance to the County of Peterborough for the scheduled 2025 events/festivals listed in this report.
Thanks, Ms. Ayotte. Nice to see some similar events happening this year. Any questions with regards to the permits? Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair, not a comment so much as, or sorry, not a question so much as a comment. I just like to emphasize how nice it is to have the use of the access behind the old arena for some of these larger events we do in the downtown area.
Okay, and a motion for the two recommendations in the report. Moved by Deputy Mayor Huntley, seconded by Councilor Natchoff. All in favor? That is approved. Next, we have a similar housekeeping report about extending the lease agreement for the the Millbrook Cavan Firefighters Association. Ms. Page, is there anything significant or is it just a continuation lease? Any comments about the lease? I think we're all very happy with the current arrangement and we want to sustain them. Do you have a question, Councilor Byrne, or are you moving it? Okay, question, Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to, I guess, our CAO, way back when I mentioned about the possibility of the health bus or health clinic that's on wheels, making use, would that be able to be incorporated into this lease with the firefighting association? Be willing to look at that? It was something that was going to come up on a future report. I just like to mention it now when we're doing this, just in case it impacts one or the other.
So this is a lease agreement for the old hall, not the former Station 1. So are you suggesting that there might be? Yeah, I think you're thinking of the other facility. It's not old Station 1. Correct. So I don't think they could fit it in there and we got that old. Okay, no problem at all. It's an honest mistake. So anyways, with that clarity now achieved, can anyone make a move for the recommendation? Move in a seconder. Moved by Councilor Edgerton out of historical reverence and seconded by Deputy Mayor Huntley. All in favor? That is approved. Council and committee verbal reports, any verbal reports, committees of council. Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair, just like to mention that this storm we've had in the last week or two has done a lot of damage to a lot of the local people that work hard at making maple syrup. And some of the events that they had planned for the upcoming days will be impacted. How much and when, I don't know, but anybody in the community that's interested in taking part in some of these need to research it a little better, maybe, because some of them have been canceled just due to the damage in the sugar bushes.
Thanks, Councilor Byrne. Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Through your chair, I just wanted to kind of make the announcement of the Earth Day activities that are going to take place on April the 22nd that the Sustainability Committee has been working very diligently on. I believe Ms. Ayotte's got some great marketing that's going to go on and advertising the event as it comes out. So all good.
Seeing no other committee reports, the library meeting was held last week, so we had a great discussion about further fleshing out or maybe rejuvenating some of the deliverables in the strategic plan. They are moving forward with what I will call a blind project. So those blackout blinds that can enable them to utilize actually in cooperation with early on for certain programming that they're going to run in some of the facilities in the old Millbrook School. So they're moving forward with that. And we're having additional conversations about some HR matters as well. So that's a brief update. And I'll get to general business after. And Councilor Natchoff has another update as well.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just briefly, Millbrook Valley Trails. In our last meeting, we were just planning for our work day and cleanup of the trails and stuff. Otherwise, everything's going fine. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Natchoff. Can I get a motion for those verbal reports? Moved by Councilor Byrne, seconded by Councilor Natchoff. All in favor? That is approved. Just with regards to general business, I just thought it was a bit more appropriate to bring it up here, but there's been a lot going on, as Councilor Byrne alluded to, with regards to staff requirements of working overtime with regards to keeping the warming stations open, obviously communications, and Bridget and her staff working so diligently to get out important information for everyone. So it's been a really all hands on deck event. And so I'm really proud of everyone's efforts to step up and make themselves available. And it's really great to see. And obviously we have to thank the great work from the various public works teams, but also the Hydro One workers that are coming from out of province and around the province to come and help us through this issue. So I know it's been a frustrating time, and we're trying to work together with the county folks as well as our city friends and everyone to try to pull together to get this behind us as fast as possible. So we know there's still a significant portion of folks without power, unfortunately, in the township and in the county. So we're going to continue keeping this CMCC open for charging and heat purposes, and we encourage you to do those. And I also want to special thanks to the Millbrook Legion, who I don't believe is open anymore for coffee during the day, but they did make themselves available during the outage in the township. So I just wanted to thank Diane and everyone at the Legion for supporting the community as they do. And just to double down again, it's been great to hear and see a lot of neighbors helping neighbors, whether it's generator, wise or just checking in, et cetera. So that's what makes living in a rural community so great. So thanks for everyone for doing that work. Next, we have correspondence for information. Seeing none, then correspondence for action. Chief Belfour, you're going to speak to this additional item.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Just some background on this request from the Ministry of the Solicitor General. In 2024, the Ontario government announced a 3-year, $30 million fire protection grant to support firefighters' health and safety, with $10 million allocated annually, focusing on cancer prevention and infrastructure improvements for municipal fire departments. Cavan Monaghan was fortunate enough to receive $18,000 originally, and it was identified in our capital works budget request. And that's going to be for the use or put towards the funding of diesel exhaust extraction systems in both Station 1 and Station 2. In this letter here, we're just looking for a motion from council to use the funds that they've identified here, $361.73 additional funds that were going to be in addition to the 18,000 already received from the provincial government.
Thanks, Chief. And I don't want you to think I forgot you. I want to thank you personally and all the firefighters for all their hard work during this time. We have the opportunity now of this additional thing. So we're happy and very grateful for the additional funds, as we were for the initial contribution as well. But we do need a motion of council with regards to the following recommendation: that council support and approve the use of the additional grant funding from the Ministry of the Solicitor General for the Fire Protection Grant 2024-2025 in the amount of $361.73 to support the approved project, being the funding request for the installation of diesel exhaust extractors for our Station 1 and Station 2. Any mover for those recommendations? Councillor Edgerton, Deputy Mayor Huntley, all in favor? That is approved. Bylaws. The following bylaws: that bylaw number 2025-19, zoning bylaw amendment for 2097 Whittington Drive, ZBA-01-25, and bylaw number 2025-20 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a temporary use agreement between JKR Realty Limited and the Corporation of the Township of Cavan Monaghan, and bylaw number 2025-21 being a bylaw to remove the holding H symbol from the bylaw number 2018-58 as amended, related to the lands described as parts 1, 2, and 3 of Plan 45R-17774 in part of Lot 12, Concession 6, Geographic Township of Cavan Monaghan, and bylaw number 2025-22 being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute a lease agreement between the Township of Cavan Monaghan and the Millbrook Firefighters Association, be read a first, second, third time and passed this day, 7th day of April, signed by the mayor of the clerk and the corporate seal attached thereto. Moved by Councillor Byrne, seconded by Councillor Natchoff. There is all in favor, correct? That is approved. There is no unfinished business. Any notices in motion? Seeing none. The confirming bylaw, that bylaw number 2025-23 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the meeting held April 7th, 2025, be read a first, second, third time and passed the 7th day of April, signed by the mayor and the clerk and the corporate seal attached thereto. And again, a mover for the confirming bylaw. Moved by Deputy Mayor Huntley, seconded by Councillor Edgerton. All in favor? That is approved. Lastly, motion to adjourn today's meeting. Moved by Deputy Mayor Huntley and Councillor Natchoff. All in favor? That is approved. There are a number of upcoming events, and I'm going to add one to the list that oh no, it's the first one on the list. Thankfully, I didn't have to add it. So tomorrow night, we are hosting an open house with Chief Betts and myself. And so he's got a nice presentation about policing in the township that we'll be going through. And that's at 7 p.m. at the CMCC in the community hall. The Cavan Monaghan Public Library Board meeting is Tuesday, April 15th, 2025 at 7 p.m. at the Millbrook branch. The next regular council meeting is Tuesday, April 22nd at 1 p.m. Note that's Tuesday because of the Easter weekend. And Earth Day, Tuesday, April 22nd, as Deputy Mayor Huntley alluded to, the events will be going on from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the CMCC Community Hall. And subsequently, we have the Millbrook Valley Trails Advisory Committee meeting, which will be held on Monday, April 28th at 4 p.m. Thanks everyone for attending and viewing online, and we will see you in the township. Take care.